Today's episode is brought to you by MRO. MRO is the single source for smarter data. Driving a new era of clinical data intelligence, we connect structure and transform data into actionable insights that enable confident decisions, sharpen operations, accelerate research, and elevate patient care. With 24 years of trusted solutions and partnerships, MRO empowers a stronger healthcare ecosystem built on smarter data so teams can measure, learn, and improve. Learn more at www.mrocorp.com.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Primo Perspective. I'm Kristen Borth.
And I'm Lorie Mills. And Kristen, do we have an exciting topic today to talk about?
We do.
We do. This is actually a topic you and I have discussed amongst ourselves many times. That is generational differences and what we're seeing in the workplace now. And not only the workplace, but with students, how we navigate that, how we communicate with each other. Just overall, how do we survive in this world together? So let's talk about that. So you tell me, Kristen, what is it like? Because you're an instructor. What's it like for you now with students to deal with them?
You know, it's really interesting. When I first started was in 2019 teaching, and that was pre-COVID and pretty normal. And we know that, a lot of the HIT, RHIA are second career. So it's not like their first career individuals, but my program is made up of about, 30% are first career, and, the rest, the 70% are second career or just advancing. And I will say that in 2019, when I started, we kind of all synced up. We were good. We were working through it. We were all kind of, learning together, if you will. And there was a lot of excitement about learning that I felt like from my classes. After COVID, I have felt like, in a lot of ways, there's a lot of entitlement. Like, you need to teach me this one thing and not, I get a book and I get to learn from the book, and then I'm going to, get enhancements from my instructor, but more so, you have to teach me this component. And so I found that very interesting, like a spoonful at a time, not here's everything you need to know. Now go find what you want to look at. To the point that when I started, it was, we're going to start, in this chapter, this is what we're doing. And then you've got your quiz, you've got all your homework and assignments. Now I have to give specific reading pages within the chapter that I want them to focus on for them to focus on those pages, which I find very different.
So you were saying that after COVID and many of your students, this is their second career. So is that really generational, or is that more of just a post-COVID era thing that we're seeing?
Yeah, like an expectation. I don't know. But also when I think about it, it makes me wonder if these things are generational or if they're seasons of life, where we're now in a season where we have information at our fingertips, and that crosses over generations because, if you look at, and I heard somebody say this, if you look up and you do what every good researcher does and you Google something about us, if you just start by putting in generations, they kind of categorize us all as stupid. Like, each generation is stupid. Each generation has their problems, but we all have different nuances to them. And I don't think that's true, which I thought it was really funny, but that's where it made me wonder, do we actually have this breakdown where generations are unable to communicate, unable to work together, unable to do certain things? Or do we just have a season where now we have Google, whereas my parents didn't have Google when they were in college. My grandparents didn't have that they had one encyclopedia. I remember my grandma telling me, oh, I had one encyclopedia in my home, and I would read that and find information. And
oh yeah, I can remember the encyclopedia books. Yeah, that's really cool because we had a whole set when I was growing up. I can remember the book.
How fun.
Is it Encyclopedia Britannica? Yeah.
Yes.
So I can remember looking through the pages of the book, and now it's like we just Google whatever we need to know.
Yeah. Like rarely do we go to a book.
Right. I know. Even for recreational reading, we don't read by a book anymore. It's usually always on a device. So it's funny we were talking about, because I've been looking this. I have a presentation that I do about generational communication and interacting with each other. And it breaks out, our baby boomers are 1945 to 1967. And those people are getting to retirement age or retiring. And then you have Gen X, which is my generation. I was born in 74. And then you have millennials from 81 to 96. And then Zoomers. I love this. Zoomers from 96 to 12, which we call Gen Z. And we're all working together. And I find it difficult sometimes to communicate. All of my kids are Gen Zers. And so just communicating with them is so interesting, because one thing that Gen Zers do not want to do is they do not want to talk on the telephone. Like,
I know.
not call
they
me.
Avoid it at all costs.
Yes. I will text you all day long. Now with my kids, they may or may not respond. Who knows? But their preferred method of communication is text. And I found when I was director at a hospital system, when I first started there, I had all long-term employees who'd been there for years and years. I'm talking like some of those employees had been there for over 30 years. So they were very much, baby boomers and had been there forever. But when some of them started to retire out and I was hiring new people, a lot of them were Gen Zs. And they do communicate very differently. They process very differently. And I will say this, and I'm not bashing any generation. No. We all have to adapt, but I think that's where the miscommunication comes sometimes. I think sometimes younger generations expect the older generations to do all of the adapting and do everything their way. And it doesn't work that way. We all have to flex and try different things in order to make it work.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think any one generation is bad. I actually think that with this, new work environment where we have, 5 generations or more now in the workplace together working, I think there is so much collaboration that could happen that would be utterly impactful to any environment. Speaking of healthcare, I think that's one of the ways that, the millennials, zennials, Gen Zers, and coming up very soon is the Gen Alphas, where they want that information right at their fingertips. They've always had information right at their fingertips. They want that. And so when we look at, the generations and then just zone in on healthcare, we started off with education, but we zone in on healthcare specifically. I think that's where generational interactions and communication start to become our superpower a little bit. Not only do we get to have more information for the boomers and the Xers that they were not accustomed to because they weren't raised in that age, and we get to start feeding, more of the, I need the information now. I want it now.
Yeah, I think back, when I was growing up, I was high school when the internet really come about, and we had dial-up connections and things like that, and that sound that the dial-up made. And I think about, oh my gosh, things were so slow back then, but we thought it was just so fascinating, because here we are accessing the web, and we've never been able to do that before. And now if I can't get on a website within like 3 seconds, I'm frustrated. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with this Wi-Fi? It's kind of like a microwave. When microwaves came out when I was a kid, you'd stand in front of the microwave and be like, oh, this is so cool. And now it's like, oh my gosh, can this not hurry up and get ready?
Yes. Well, okay. But in that, in that gives such an incredible perspective as to what the generations with communication are experiencing. We've always had it really fast. I can't remember a time without a microwave. Very limited amounts of dial-up. And then, I got a cell phone when I was in high school, and it was giant, but I got a cell phone when I was in high school, and my parents were super against it. But I was like, I'm going to do this. I want to explore this. And that instantaneous from a very young age, it changes the way we communicate with things. It changes our perception of possibilities,
right,
and what can happen. So I do go back to, I think that's our superpower.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think the fact we have information at our fingertips is wonderful.
Yeah.
Now we can look things up and it be right there. Now, if I have a coding question, I can Google and usually find the answer.
When we do get going with talking about generations within healthcare and within our environments, how I can loop that back to my experience with trying to apply for jobs, because I would go in, excited and, just showcasing my education, and somebody who had been in that environment, like you said, for 30 years, the way that they communicate, the way that they talk, the way that they, position themselves is very different than what I was doing. And so I found that as a really fascinating portion for me when I started in the workplace. And I was told in school, you are going to be one of the youngest, most educated, people coming out into the workforce, but that doesn't mean you know everything. It's up to you to then go learn from the generation before you. So I love that. And I also thrive a little bit on that. I was just telling you, with my students, I often try really hard to push them to find somebody who is more seasoned than them, to go out and learn from them, learn how they communicate, learn how they, have started their profession, so that they can get that exposure as well. Because they might be the most educated, but they might not be.
Right. Yeah. And I've always said that, when students would come into where we were working, mentor them, help them learn, because yes, you learn a lot of things in school, but the things you learn in school is not always real world. And so I feel like we should definitely help the new ones that are coming in with that real world. And things have changed so much, but it just mentoring them and helping them learn. Another thing that I talk about in my presentation is not only generational conversation and how we have to all adapt to each other, but it's also between genders. Like, males and females communicate very differently, and people are like, oh, you can't say that, that's sexist. It's not. It's science. We do communicate very differently. And so I see sometimes I have a very direct way of communicating, and you know that. You and I, we've worked together long enough, you know that. So I do communicate a lot of times like a male would communicate, and I get in trouble sometimes because I'm the kind of person that I'm just going to tell you, and then let's move on. I'm fine. Let's move on. I can get into a discussion, an argument more or less. And then in 15 minutes, I'm like, okay, let's go to lunch. A lot of females don't work that way. Right. So it's not only are we looking at generational, we have to look at gender communication as well, and how we come across. And I have had to dial it back sometimes and remember, hey, you need to be more approachable to your staff and not be so, this is it, this is how it's going to be. I have to be more flexible. And I've learned that over the years, and having children has helped that as well. So,
Yeah, it's funny. I once saw a really interesting interview by a neurologist, and I can't remember what, high position he had, but he was in research, and he was researching the brain, and he was doing all these scans of female and male brains, and it was hysterical to hear his reaction, because he said at the end of the research, the very basic of it was, well, the male brain has more in common with a whale than it does the female brain. And I found that hysterical because we are so similar in makeup and how we are, but the way that we think is so different. So
it is very different.
That's where I've told many of, the docs that I've engaged with, or, the C-suite individuals helping them, a lot of them are males, but the females like yourself that are very blunt, you got to remind them your bedside manner is super important. And they're like, well, I'm just giving them the information. Like, well, you can't just walk in and be like, you have cancer. Here we are. Well, this is what we're going to do. Like, maybe be a little bit more gentle.
Yes.
And it's painful for them sometimes.
I know it is. And for me, I've learned that, kind of dial it back, especially dealing with my kids. They all three have different personalities. Yeah. And so my oldest two are in their 20s. My oldest is 27, my middle is 23, and then my baby's 20, and he's the baby, and he's a he. And so he has been very loved on his whole life.
Yes.
So they're all really great kids, but still the way they communicate is much different. And I laugh at my oldest daughter. She's a junior high school teacher. She teaches 7th and 8th grade science and history. And just her talking about dealing with the kids, the ones that are 13 years old, and how different it is and how difficult it is. It's amazing to listen to her talk about them and having to deal with them. And I think, gosh, am I still going to be in the workforce when those kids get up here? I don't know if I'll survive.
I would rather deal with docs any day than middle school, high school kids. I don't know. There's something about them.
It is. I mean, it is amazing though. But we were talking about pre-COVID or COVID earlier. And my daughter was teaching 2nd grade during COVID. And after the whole school shut down and everything, and then the next year she was having a lot of trouble just with the kids in general. And her principal reminded her, she said, you have to remember, these kids were in kindergarten when COVID hit, and it wiped out. So all of the social skills they would have learned in kindergarten and 1st grade to come to 2nd grade, they missed all of that. So they were a year and a half, 2 years behind on social development because they didn't have that. And I think sometimes we have to remember that. And I try to be more cognizant of it nowadays, that COVID did do a number on a lot of people, even me. And we communicate differently because of it now.
Agreed. Yeah. And I think, a lot of our HI professionals that are emerging from years previous, their soft skills might not be as, refined. They might know their stuff, but their soft skills, like weirdly enough, writing an email. I have an assignment that says I will give you 1 point extra credit if you write me a professional email, because so many of them do the text to write, or, don't sign their name on an email. Don't think to do that. And then their email address is something obscure, so you can't.
You don't know who it is.
Yeah. And it really hit me, which is kind of funny. It really hit me. I was at a store and she was asking for my email address. And so I gave her my email address and she said, "Oh, wow." Now, mind you, I turned 40 this year. So I'm now middle-aged, but it hit me because she said, "Oh, wow, you're from the group that got to use your name." And I'm like, whoa.
Got to use your name? What does that mean?
Yeah, in my email address. So my name is my email address. And she said, we don't get to anymore. All the names are taken. And
wow. I had never thought of that.
I hadn't either. And so when she said that, it kind of looped me back to, one, they don't understand because we were at the beginning. They also like their soft skills with just communicating appropriately. And maybe you've seen those Instagram reels or the memes or anything where it's like going in to order coffee from a Gen Zer versus ordering a coffee from an Xer or a millennial. Right. And the Gen Zer always looks angry, like, oh, you want what? Like, you give them this, order and they're like, okay, any type of milk. And you're like, whatever you have. And, the way that they communicate is just not as smooth and fluid, but I think it can be taught and I think it can be learned easily. They're very smart. They just, I feel like COVID kind of pushed them to not have to exercise that. And so when they don't have to exercise it, they don't have to, gain more. Plus they didn't interact with their teachers the same.
Right.
So they didn't, they weren't forced to do that. So I don't know. I think healthcare has some hurdles in that for me. Just from that teaching side, watching my students come through there and thinking to myself, like, someday you're going to be handling my medical record information. Oh yeah. And you can't spell there. Like,
or know how to use it in a sentence.
Exactly. In the correct tense. Like, that's a problem. Interesting. Okay. Or you're going to be talking to doctors. And we've talked about this before. You're going to be talking to doctors and you are harsh and blunt and you think you're all that because of the way you come across, not that you necessarily do. That doctor's going to eat you alive.
Right.
Hey, you don't know anything. What are you talking to me like that for? Yeah. So I think the schools really need to pick up teaching those soft skills.
They do. They do. One thing, I have always been one that if I get a phone call in the office and it's not anything I can help them with, or I don't really know who to send them to, I never transfer anybody. I always take their name and number, and then I try to find out who they need to talk to before I send them. And I always call them back myself and say, okay, this is who you need to talk to. And here's their number. Because there's nothing that drives me any more crazy than trying to call somewhere and get passed around 4 or 5 times and nobody can help. And it's like, so I try to teach my younger staff when they were coming on, okay, if you get a call like that, instead of just saying, I'm not the person you need to talk to and transfer, and I'm just take their name and number and let's call them and figure out who they need to see and who they need to talk to. I got tickled one time. I had a business call and one of my kids were in the car. My middle daughter was in the car with me, and I was talking, very professionally, and I get off the call and she said, who was that? Because you don't talk like that. And I started laughing. That's my customer service voice. So, and it's true. I think we have a certain way that we communicate with people. You and I communicate. We do not communicate like boss and employee. We communicate like friends. And so, but there's other times that you and I are on calls together that we're very professional to the people that we're speaking with because we don't know them that well. Right. And I think that's a people want to say we're fake when we approach someone more professionally than just what we normally would. And it's not being fake. I think it's it's kind of a respect thing. That's how I see it. If I'm going to speak to someone I don't really know, I'm showing them respect by trying to have a professional conversation with them.
Yes.
Instead of just, going down like we would a normal friend or something like that. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, I do think, that first impressions are everything. And we've kind of moved away from that thought process and then have labeled it, like you said, that, oh, this person's fake because they sounded one way. But then when I got to know them, they were like this. And I think that's what my students really push hard, especially the ones that are going straight from high school into my program, or the ones that I have interviewed before that are like super casual. And in my brain, I'm thinking, well, I don't know how you'd be with a client. I don't know how you would be able to handle these situations because you already came across super, super relaxed. I will never forget my first interview, like real interview. And I, walked in as professionally as I could and sat down. And then when I was interviewing, 5-10 years later, somebody, and watching that person walk in with not even close to what I would call professional clothes. It was more like, casual clothes. They were wearing jeans and a baggy sweater, and their hair was kind of brushed, but not done.
Yep.
And I was taught in school, so this is a big thing for me that I always watch. I was taught in school that you always wipe off the top of your shoes, like your heels or your for guys, your professional shoes. Wipe them off. You don't want any, rain beads on them or anything like that. You want them to look nice. I have always looked at their shoes, and one person walked in with what looked like their gardening shoes. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. Now, that's not to say that I then judged their knowledge and their skills from that, but it was just a question in my mind of, can they step up and be professional when they need to? Because corporate world does not look friendly on gardening shoes for tense situations.
No. And I stress that everybody that knows me knows I love clothes and I love to dress. And so when I go to a conference or something, I'm usually always dressed, I'll wear coats and suits and things like that. And always awesome shoes. Always.
Yes.
Got to have awesome shoes.
It's true. Fabulous shoes.
So the thing is, I try to instill in my children and all, when you're going to meet somebody, that's a sign of respect to me. If you're going to meet a boss or going to meet a leader that you're interviewing with, that just shows that you respect them enough that you got dressed. I've literally watched people come to one of the facilities I'm at and fill out an application with pajamas on. And so, and I'm thinking, if you're filling out an application, great. I don't even know who you are, but if I see you, if I go to interview you, if I pull that application and I remember, I saw them in pajamas in the hallway.
Yeah. I'm
not going to have a very high opinion of you, because I feel like that you don't want to portray that professionalism, and that you can't portray it, or you don't know any better. And so that would be an automatic ding right there. So I'm just throwing this out there for people. If you're going to fill an application out, if you're not doing it online in your living room, then at least put decent clothes on to go out in public. Don't wear your pajamas.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And tying back to like our generational thing, I will say, I'm going to take ownership for this. I don't know if it's my generation or not, but I do think that millennials brought in a lot more casual than previous generations.
Yes.
We kind of came off as almost, in a lot of ways, because and now Gen Z has overtaken us with, the level of degrees that have been given out for that generation. But we did come in kind of with this entitled chip on our shoulder a little bit of like, well, we can conquer the world and we can change the world and we can do all this, and I can do it in my casual clothes, not my my business suit. And so I think in a lot of ways we did usher that in, because the generations before us, you look at pictures, I mean, they're classically beautiful. And, it's funny because I was making fun of my mom and my grandma, because I was like, why do you all look old? You were in 9th grade. But they all were wearing professional type clothes with how they were dressed, what we would classify as more professional clothes nowadays. So it was hysterical to think about it, though, because none of my clothes in my high school pictures made me look older than I was. So, yeah.
Well, boomers, and I guess Gen Z, Gen X as well. A man, when he went to work, he had on a suit and a tie and dress shoes. And, that was just kind of the common outfit. That's what they wore. Ladies, pencil skirts, usually with a blazer, and heels and all that. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm glad that we've kind of moved away from that, because even though I do like wearing that occasionally, I would, hose. When I first started out in the profession, you had to wear hose if you were going to wear a dress. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad we got away from that. Really am.
Oh my word.
But you know, we think about, so when men, you never saw their ankles and you never saw, they always had socks on. And so that's one of the trends that I find kind of interesting is you'll see a guy with a sports coat on and pants, and they're the ankle pants with, you know, no socks and their shoes. And that kind of takes me back a little bit. I'm not saying that it's a bad look. It's not. The guy, some guys can pull that off. But it's just so funny to think about, okay, back in the day, it was the tie, the suit, and, you know, dress shoes. And now here we are showing our naked ankles and dress shoes. And
funny story about, I mentioned pantyhose to my, my students in one of, this was a few semesters back. In one of the conversations, I said, okay, if you're going to go in for your interview, you know, you want to put on your pantyhose and you want to make sure that you're put together. Because if you're going to wear anything like skirt wise, you want to just make sure you look good. And one of the girls raised her hands and she was like, what are pantyhose? I was like, oh, like hose where you put them on. And she's like tights? And I was like, well, yes, they're like tights, but they're thinner than tights. And she goes, I'm going to have to look this up. I've never heard of hose. And then she sent me an email later. It was like, okay, I know what they are now. And they look incredibly uncomfortable. It's like, oh, girl, they're the worst thing ever.
They are.
You're not going to like wearing them, but here you will. So it was really funny to me to hear that, because I also am glad that we have done away with those a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. So, you know, it's been, like I said, it's been interesting over the years to see how things have changed and how we communicate and close it. We were not going to dive into fashion, but here we are. We're diving into the fashion piece of it. You know, one of the funniest things, I saw a meme not too long ago that said it was what people wore during COVID, you know, for virtual meetings and all, and they said for them to come to the office that way. So they this group dressed up and they came to the office the way they dressed during COVID. And all the guys had on like dress shirts and coats, and they had on shorts, basketball shorts, you know, and tennis shoes. And the women had on, their tops were all professional, but then they would have on like pajama bottoms and, you know, just, it was so funny to see, but it was true, because during that time we all dressed up from just from the waist up. We didn't dress the whole body anymore. I will say, I used to look at people, because I used to be one of these that was like, I cannot believe she wore those leggings out to town, you know, leggings and a big shirt. I just couldn't believe it. Well, now that I've been working at home for the last 3 years, guess what Lorie does? Lorie wears leggings and big shirts all the time out in town. And my kids laugh because they were like, Mama, you used to wouldn't do that. I know I used to wouldn't, but times have changed, and we can be thankful for that.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. The one trend that I don't love so much, but I think is actually a really positive one in the HI departments, I don't love our HI professionals wearing scrubs for me.
Oh, really?
I don't because I see our profession and our departments as the business side more so. But I understand it, and I think it's a great addition to kind of help them mesh in when they're talking to docs, when they're, you know, out on the floor, because they still do go out on the floor in a lot of areas. But it's one of the things that I had to like look at and be like, I don't, because that was another reason aside from me fainting when I get shots, and not wanting to touch patients, I didn't want to wear scrubs all day. That was the other reason that I really did not go into nursing. So yeah, that's been something interesting for me to try to grapple with, if you will.
I've worked in both scenarios. I've worked where we wore professional clothing, and I've worked in departments where we were allowed to wear scrubs, and I like either one. I just don't want to wear the same color every day. We had like multiple colors we could wear throughout the week. You know, certain days we wore this, and other days we wore that. But I think in all reality and seriousness, you know, as we go through our work days and just
Mhm.
talking to students and things like that, we definitely do need to mentor them on these soft skills and
Yes.
being professional, how to look professional. You don't always have to have on a suit or a dress or, a blazer or whatever to be professional.
Yeah.
There are other ways you can to do that. And I think it's our job to mentor these younger
Yes.
people that are coming out and to help teach them those skills, because
Yeah.
regardless of why they don't have them, they're going to need them
Yeah.
going forward. And if we're not teaching it, they may not get it at home or at
Mhm.
their high school or wherever. We're definitely going to have to work on that and help them transition into the workforce, because um it we want to have a really strong profession, a HI profession.
Mhm.
And I think we just have to take a hold of that and make sure that when we're having people that are coming into our profession, that we do mentor them and we do help them as best we can.
Yeah. And I will put the pressure back on, the incoming generations to look for opportunities to learn from the generations before
Hmm.
us, and explore and understand what was happening, because it's vitally important for us. So
Yeah.
I think that that's equally important.
Yeah, I think so too. And you know what? I cannot think of a better person than you to be educating our new HR professionals that are coming in, because
Thank
you
you.
are the class act. There is no doubt. And I love working for you. So
Oh,
you are the person that they should model themselves after.
that means a ton, Lorie. Thank you. And I've told my husband many times, if Lorie wasn't here, I don't know what I'd do. You're my favorite. So it's so fun to get to work with you. And yeah. So
Well, great.
I guess we'll wrap it up there. Thank you,
I
Lorie.
guess we will. You're so welcome, Kristen. And I guess we'll talk about it again next time.
Sounds good. See
All
ya.
right. See ya.